A billionaire's son had every
Emergency.
advantage. Private tutors, elite schools, limitless money, yet he failed every test. His father was furious, the world mocked him, and he almost gave up on life. Then an aging black janitor, overlooked by everyone, whispered a single secret that turned his life upside down. What was the secret, and how did it change everything? Stick around to the end, and don't forget to subscribe if this story shocks you as much as it shocked me. Ethan Mercer, son of steel magnate Jonathan Mercer, had never passed a single test in his life, not because he lacked resources, but because he never believed he needed to try. Tutors came and went, some quitting in frustration, others taking fat paychecks to do his homework for him, but no matter how much his father threatened to cut him off, Ethan just didn't care. And when his prestigious boarding school threatened expulsion after his latest catastrophic report card, Jonathan finally told him, "If you fail again, you're on your own. No more money, no more trust fund, nothing." Ethan laughed, thinking his father would never dare, but deep down, the fear of being stripped of privilege gnawed at him. One evening, while wandering the empty halls of Mercer Academy, feeling sorry for himself after a brutal math test, Ethan spotted an elderly janitor polishing the floor. A tall, wiry man with skin like mahogany, silver in his hair, and eyes that seemed to see through walls. His name tag read, Mr. Daniels, but most students didn't even know his first name. Ethan, usually too arrogant to acknowledge the help, muttered something bitter about how useless school was, how tests were rigged, how no one ever really cared about him as a person, and to his surprise, Mr. Daniels chuckled softly and said, "Kid, you're failing not because you can't pass, but because you've been asking the wrong questions." Ethan frowned. What's that supposed to mean? Daniels put down his mop, leaned close, and whispered a single line that burned into Ethan's brain. The answer isn't on the paper, it's in the pattern. Confused, Ethan demanded more, but Daniels simply said, "Meet me here tomorrow night if you really want to learn," and shuffled away before Ethan could press him further. The next night, curiosity dragged Ethan back to the darkened hallway, where Daniels waited with a stack of old, yellowed notebooks full of strange diagrams, numbers, and riddles. He explained that tests, not just school tests, but every challenge in life, follow patterns, and if you learn to see those patterns, you can solve anything. Daniels, who had grown up dirt poor in Alabama in the 1960s, never had Ethan's privileges, yet he'd mastered these patterns to survive segregation, find opportunities, and quietly become one of the wisest men Ethan had ever met. Night after night, Ethan studied under the janitor, who refused to give direct answers. Instead, he asked questions that forced Ethan to think differently. Why does this problem exist? Who wrote it? What are they trying to make you prove? Ethan, for the first time in his life, stopped coasting and started learning, not cramming facts, but decoding how systems worked. Within weeks, his grades shot up. He shocked his teachers by acing a physics exam no one expected him to pass, and when Jonathan Mercer demanded to know what had changed, Ethan only smiled and said, "I started asking the right questions." But the story didn't end there, because Daniels revealed a secret of his own. Long ago, he'd been a math prodigy offered a scholarship to MIT, but he'd turned it down to care for his sick mother and ended up working menial jobs while tutoring kids in secret. He never told anyone because pride, pain, and the scars of racism had convinced him no one would listen. Ethan, humbled, asked why Daniels would waste his gift on someone like him. Daniels smiled sadly. "Because you're the kind of boy who thinks the world owes him everything, and if you can change, maybe others will too." Soon, rumors spread. The billionaire's son wasn't failing anymore. Jealous classmates tried to steal Ethan's notes, teachers accused him of cheating, and his own father hired a private investigator to figure out who was helping him. But when Jonathan learned it was the janitor, he exploded, calling Daniels a fraud and forbidding Ethan to meet him again. Ethan defied his father for the first time, sneaking out to study in abandoned classrooms at night, and the bond between student and mentor deepened. Daniels taught Ethan not just how to pass tests, but how to negotiate, how to read people, how to see the motives behind every question life asked. The ultimate test came when Jonathan arranged for Ethan to take an elite corporate entrance exam, a brutal assessment designed for future CEOs, and made a deal. Pass it, and you inherit control of Mercer Industries. Fail, and you're cut off for good. On the morning of the test, Daniels pressed a folded slip of paper into Ethan's hand and said, "Remember, the answer isn't on the paper, it's in the pattern. Trust yourself." During the exam, Ethan faced impossible questions, ones no amount of rote memorization could solve, but instead of panicking, he looked for patterns. In numbers, in words, even in the examiner's subtle hints. And by the end, he not only passed but achieved one of the highest scores in the program's history. Jonathan, stunned, finally asked his son, "What did that janitor teach you that I couldn't with all my money?" Ethan looked his father in the eye and replied, "You tried to buy me answers. He taught me how to think." Moved in a way he didn't expect, Jonathan offered Daniels a high-paying consulting role at Mercer Industries, but Daniels declined with a smile. "I'm right where I'm supposed to be, helping lost kids find their way." The story spread beyond the academy. News outlets picked it up, turning Daniels into a quiet legend and Ethan into proof that privilege without wisdom is useless. Years later, Ethan, now a respected entrepreneur, would say in interviews that his real education didn't come from Mercer Academy or Ivy League universities, but from a janitor who taught him a single secret in a dimly lit hallway: the answer isn't on the paper, it's in the pattern.